So, what is engineering? I did my undergrad in chemical engineering, and now I'm actually a professor at a business school. I don't teach engineering, but I teach about innovation and I understand about what technology is. So, what is engineering? For me, it is coming up with technical solutions to problems and looking at the world and realizing that many of the world's problems have a technical solution, or there's a belief that there is a technical solution. So it's not necessarily humans that we have to sort of rely on. It's not a political environment that we have to rely on, but there is some sort of physical technical solution. You can look and use, maybe it is physical laws and how the world actually works, right? So chemistry, for example, or you look at using physics to understand how the world works, and then you solve that particular problem, mitigating all of the need to rely on human beings, right? Humans are a really finicky, fickle bunch. They're really strange and they behave in really weird ways that are often difficult to forecast. It's called unintended consequences. And what engineering sort of fundamentally does is looks at the world and says, how do we interact with this world so we don't necessarily have to rely on humans as much. We can use technology, so robots, for example, or we can use different physical laws to do different things and rearrange the current environment to better suit how we can actually interact with the world. Now, there's a lot of problems with engineering. That's what I want to be upfront about, right? So we assume that humans are not necessarily important. There's people that understand, don't get me wrong, all the engineers understand that people are important. But what you try to do is design a system that is sort of independent of human beings, right? That they are kind of like a secondary concern. Now, the other thing that we assume with engineering is that the world is ours to interact with, ours to design. And from an ecological point of view, I don't think a lot of ecologists would love that perspective, because I think nature is really wonderful, right? There is extreme focus on efficiency and getting things done within engineering, right? And the goal is to come up with one particular solution. Often that one particular solution is difficult to arrive upon, and it can be inferior if you don't account for all of these sort of other things that are going on within a particular environment, right? So, you might build this wonderful product, but then you don't design it in the real world, or you don't sort of think about how people are actually going to interact with it, and it might not work the way that you think it's actually going to work. You see that all the time. I have a tendency to sort of believe that kind of stuff, that if you just have a design, then it's actually going to work out. Now, another thing to think about is often, and this is part of it. It's often that there's not necessarily a business case that you might think about in terms of the solution. And I remember the project that I was working on, my fourth year project for engineering, was the extraction of nimbin from a neem seed. And it seems kind of really abstract, but they actually is like a pesticide that you can use. And our sort of proposed project, it was a pilot project. It was really complicated, really expensive. And of course, when we actually did this thing, we didn't sort of think about the business case as much. We sort of thought about it, but we didn't have sort of realistic understanding of what this actually means. So what the business case would be is thinking about all of these sort of scenarios and thinking about, hey, can we make this thing profitable given the environment that we actually live in? And often the case is no, right? It's just not there. But then you can also think about it from a design perspective, or thinking about from kind of a startup perspective. How do you actually get this thing going? And it's not as easy as you think it is, right? And that's where there's different elements from different areas that can add to engineering. It's not necessarily, the world is not necessarily just about problem solving in of itself, but The benefit with engineering that is really exciting is that you do realize that a lot of problems can be solved, and there are a lot of technical solutions to the world that we simply just don't acknowledge. We kind of throw up our hands and we think like we can't solve these things. We've seen a lot of really wonderful things around the world that have been created by engineers that have just simply said, hey, why don't we just solve this thing? This is kind of stupid, right? Like, why don't we actually pursue this thing? And we need to have that sort of technical understanding on how to actually build this thing. What does it mean to get from here, where we have no idea what we're actually thinking about, to we have an end product that is somewhat functional? And so that's the other thing to think about, right? And this is what's really cool, is that end product that's somewhat functional is better than what we have, right? And that's where I think engineers have a significant advantage, is they don't necessarily just throw up their hands and say, hey, this is the way the world is that it's going to be this whole political mess. They're going to simply say, this is dumb. Like, why are we arguing here? Why don't we just actually build this thing, see what happens? And you build this thing, and it's a pile of crap, right? Whenever you build something for the first time, it's a pile of crap. But it's a starting position. And that starting position allows you to keep going and design other wonderful things that other people just would have given up and they would have stopped. So I think, what is engineering? Fundamentally, it's just about problem solving and looking at the world using the physical world often, right? So chemistry, physics, I don't know, these kind of, these kind of things, right? And using that to the advantage of creating something. And it's fundamentally human focused, right? It's often very much human focused, where we're sort of manipulating the environment. But at the same time, you actually have a solution to some really hard technical problems, or just hard world problems that we experience, whereas other people just throw up their hands. And so, yes, it causes problems, right? A lot of problems, but it also encourages a huge amount of economic prosperity across the world, and benefits most of us. All right, so hopefully this explains what engineering is. All right, take care. Have a wonderful day.